Well, good morning, Dr. R. Michael Fisher. It's been a while since I've been on, and been thinking also about just doing YouTubes and creating production, and a lot of people doing creative production on digital social media are finding, and especially the last few months, you'll see quite a bit of people posting that they feel like the whole system's changed and things are being re-rigged in how YouTubes are getting out there, or speakers like myself and others are getting out there. And no doubt there's a lot of editing and control going on, various kinds of knowledge. So just that's my intro. It's also a reason I'm sitting and questioning the value of my own cultural productions here as an artist, thinker, educator, philosopher, all the labels that I've had, including the one today, which I want to focus on, is the fearologist. So, starting in 2000, I just right before 9/11, I was doing my PhD at the time, just started, and I was been researching fear already for, since 1989. So I wanted to do something in my dissertation to synthesize a lot of the more popular and less systematic research I'd been doing on the concept of fear, and that's transdisciplinary. That means across all disciplines, not just a few, not just interdisciplinary, not just multidisciplinary, but transdisciplinary. I was really looking for this grand synthesis, and perhaps that we'd have better knowledge on the planet about fear and its management, to use simple terms, than we've had in the history of the evolution of our species. Grand scheme, huh? Yeah. Well, I'm a kind of grand thinker that way, but not just a theorist. I also am interested in practical applications. Virology was intended to be something like biology, which I love as a field, and I wanted to create the same kind of discipline, even though it's transdisciplinary, which biology itself is not. And so it had this paradoxical, ironic, maybe twist in it that I was asking for the world to adopt this coined word, fearology, even though other people have used that word a few times, but very popular and very not systematic nor scientific nor very philosophical with any depth. But I was trying to really convince the world when I put out the fearology and coined it in especially 2000, that, hey, we really need to do this peer studies anew, revolutionary wise. It has to be very, very critical and very, very distinct as a form and way of knowing. And of course, it includes multiple ways of knowing. I'm not going to go here to give you a summary of Fearology. What I'm going to do is play a little game with you because I asked AI the question this morning, what is the value of Fearology study? Question mark. Yeah, I'm not somebody who goes around asking AI about everything. Some people are addicted to it already and will get many more addicted. There's a few things I've asked it just for fun, quote, to see where AI comes out and how bright of student teacher AI is. Is it really a summation of humankind's knowledge? Oh my gosh, these accounts of, you know, both the wisdom and or the intelligence and brightness of artificial intelligence. Yeah, everything I've seen so far, unimpressive. So I'll start there. Sorry, AI, that was a critique to you, but maybe a critique to humanity as well, thinking that it has the brightest intelligence now in this digital techno world of machines, the machinic reality. Well, all that criticism aside, let's dive into what AI said. However, I have a little preface story, which is kind of cute, I think, and interesting. And it is a good colleague of mine had asked AI several questions about their own work, which was about a theory that they had been developing for a long time. I've been in relationship for near 20 years with this colleague, and I highly respect their work. I cite it a lot. They cite my work. We've co-written some work together, and they are do some specialty work on fear, but not to the extent that I do. Anyway, they asked AI about its own abilities. So they were asking really reflective questions, really digging. And it took them a week or two to keep asking different kinds of questions from different angles, is what apparently you need to do to really pull out of AI the best that it can maybe offer you, because you're not going to be satisfied with just that quick question that sounds easy and will give me an answer. No, AI needs a lot of work and a lot of questioning. So he kept asking, well, what's the best way to ask this question about my theory and the value of my theory and so on and so on. Short story is of that exchange that my colleague shared with me is that AI admitted that AI is probably going to cause more harm to the long run good of Earth and humanity than it will benefit. He finally got that out pretty straight and in detail of all the reasons why. So AI was basically being tweaked at enough, asking the right questions to prove to itself and to us humans through smart questioning, it is not the answer to the problems of the world. Okay. In fact, it's probably going to cause more harm than good. That's another video. Lots of people are talking about that. I'm sure my colleague will. I'll have him on my YouTube channel soon to talk about his experience with AI and asking those kinds of questions and getting up and getting that summarized answer, which puts the big skeptical question mark on AI, period. It's not going to go away, AI. But I asked the question that which I'll zoom in on a bit. Nick, this before I say what AI responded to, and I want to actually read it, the 2 pages of report it gave me on that question, what is the value of fearology as a study? In the last day, I've been just journaling and thinking about 35 years of work that I have put in as a researcher specializing in fear and fearlessness. It's kind of my short way I describe myself. But I call myself a fearologist since 2000 playfully. I was only doing it as a joke in a way when I started doing that. Just trying to get people's attention on a different angle and to acknowledge, perhaps, at least pay some attention to reading my work and others, that study of fear is really, really, really important. Well, little success. That's my reflection in the last few days in getting people to actually take that seriously for the most part. There are a few bright stars of attention and care that has gone into that study of fear and fearlessness. But for the most part, no, not successful in the last 35 years. So, particularly since 2000, I looked on Google Scholar and noticed that the citing of publications by authors, researchers like myself, who have used fearology as a term with seriousness, citing me or others, that the term has virtually disappeared since 2021. And one or two odd mentions of it after, where it got into a book title by a scholar in Africa in 2022. But the study of fearology just has not flown. At least it's not flying by the way I would like to see it as a systematic study, something like a biology or psychology. Excuse me. So that said, I started thinking, why has it disappeared? Why has I myself in a way, stop publishing on it. Well, it's partly because when you don't get any feedback after 2 decades plus 2.5 decades since 2000, that really, what is the point, right? It's like you've put it out there. I have hundreds of publications. If you go to Google Scholar online in a search, and virology is constantly mentioned and systematically defined, and theories and philosophies about it, and so on and so on. Applications as well, practical. But it didn't take. It just hasn't taken from what you would like to see as a researcher, where more and more people start citing it, right? And it grows. Now, there was a rise of that since 2000, and it peaked, as I said, in about 2021, if not earlier than that, it peaked. And then, yeah. Will it arise again? Yes, probably, but we'll see. And I'm not sure who's going to lead that arising. For now, I decided to kind of put a cover on it, relax, do other things that I think are more important, service to the world, even though I will always be, caring about where Fearology goes and how it can grow still. And it has a lot of growth to go. Here's what AI said, and I'll do a little bit of a critique, as I am the world expert on Fearology. And that's not just a brag. You can look at the data, look at the publications, look at the teachings, including on my YouTube video you're watching now. I have taken the topic of the study of fear and fearology further than anyone else, in much more complexity, to the point where it got so complex now people can't study it or even follow it. It's too complicated. They're not that interested. You could if you were really interested. And that would have to be like someone seriously interested, like a graduate student, or that wanted to devote themselves seriously. Now, let's see what AI summarizes then at this point in 2025. And some of it is not too bad. Excuse me. A little bit of cold coming on, I can see. When I say AI didn't do too bad a job, I give it a C minus for its summary of that question. Here's what it said. The value of fearology, or the interdisciplinary study of fear. First mistake. Fearology, in its most serious practitioner, theorist, scholar, is transdisciplinary, not just interdisciplinary. First mistake. But other people, other than myself, have attempted these interdisciplinary summaries or research publications and thinking, conferences, whatever. And they have taken an interdisciplinary approach. And I've been critical of that as a fearologist. And those people don't call themselves fearologists. They're just fearists, fear study people, right? They're just studying fear in an interdisciplinary way, which is good. It's an improvement. Okay, so get that drift first. AI starts off on a particular focus. Why it does that, I do not know. And so it says the value of fearology, or the interdisciplinary study of fear, lies in its potential to deconstruct assumptions about fear. Okay, that is a good mark. Reveal its role in human affairs and identify how it can be used to control society. First sentence, pretty darn good. Generally, a little bit of flaw, but not a bad summary. Deconstruct assumptions about fear. That's different than, right, trying to look at publications on how to manage fear, how to, conquer fear, how to be great. Virology doesn't do that. Thank goodness. There's so much of that other stuff. Now it says, next sentence, it combines approaches from philosophy, sociology, psychology, and neuroscience to offer a comprehensive understanding of how fear influences individuals and society. Well, comprehensive is what fearology is about, in the way it was coined and designed by me, to be a broad, comprehensive understanding. However, it's also supposed to be a creative, emergent working and reworking of the knowledge we have accumulated about fear. AI misses the creative bit. There's nothing in here about creativity applied into the fear studies field. You know what I'm saying? So big error there. Um, Next error, it takes four different disciplines: philosophy, sociology, psychology, and neuroscience, all very technical fields. It misses literature, arts, architecture, geography. It's really bad. Like, that's where I really mark it down. Like, no, it's not just these four fields. So why AA chooses those is frustrating to me, because some new thinker who may have asked a question like this, what is the value of fearology, or what is fearology simply, would get this kind of response from AI, and it's really quite inaccurate. Okay, it's got some accuracy. Again, C minus. So then AI is going to show you a little more detail. After it does that summary paragraph, it's going to give me a section called philosophical and psychological value. Interesting, it puts those first. And I'm glad it's putting philosophical right up there. Psychological value, of course. It's like capital P psychology has dominated, completely dominated, and philosophy before it, and philosophy turned into psychology, or psychology was birthed from philosophy, is a better way to say it, as a discipline, as a way of knowing. And psychology has tried to be science, right? Experimental, use some scientific method, but not just totally. Psychology is bigger than that in terms of methodologies of knowing. However, psychology has dominated, and philosophy before that dominated the understanding, and philosophy slash from theology. Okay, so basically AI is reproducing here the hegemony, the domination of knowing and knowledge under these disciplines, philosophy and psychology. I have fought since 1989 to fight that domination, because that's part of the skewing, that's part of the bias, that's part of the non-comprehensive. So AI doesn't get that. Like, it's missing tons of that critique within, and it could easily describe that, but it didn't. It missed it. And that's unbelievable to me. It missed it. I've published so much on this topic for so long. Under that philosophical and psychological value, let's read. So, fearology challenges existing perceptions. It's kind of repeating itself from the first paragraph, which was to deconstruct assumptions about fear. Challenges existing perceptions. Yes, it does. That is correct. Fearology aims to challenge, I like the challenge, and reconstruct. So now, not just deconstruct assumptions about fear, which was the first paragraph. It's now saying to reconstruct the commonly accepted definitions and meanings of fear. And what it should have said is, you can only reconstruct after you deconstruct. You have to do a deconstruction first. Is a major part of fearology studies. This revisioning, this revolutionizing of the philosophy theories and management of fear on this planet. It encourages a critical examination of fear, I'm quoting, as an emotion. Another error. Fearology does not the fearology I coined. There are a few people who playfully use the word fearology, call themselves even maybe a fearologist, but that would be very playfully and unseriously that they do that. I know of no other that does that as much as me. There might be one colleague that might use that word, that they're a fearologist. And that's fine, maybe two. But they do not go to the depths at all that I do. They're basically kind of students or early thinkers in this field of fear studies and fearology, which is fine. That's great that they're doing it. So, another error, major error, because I start on the assumption in fearology that philosophy and psychology shouldn't be the continuous, dominating basis, reference point for the valuation and evaluation of what fear is and what to do about fear. And it is. AI is just repeating the domination. It has no critique or capability to actually interpret my work, the true, deeper understanding of fearology, and put it to use to actually critique philosophy and psychology, which it doesn't. And there's 3 paragraphs here under psychology and philosophy, right? This little subsection. And AI is completely missing the point of what fearology is about. So this is really where I mark it down, down, down. It's certainly not going to get an A and it's not going to get a B. Um, the last part of that sentence, it's a critical examination of fear as an emotion and societal force. So it's trying to say a little bit, it's more than an emotion, it's and a societal force rather than taking its meaning for granted. Okay, fine on the taking its meaning for granted. That's pretty much just repeating itself. A societal force, that's good. There, that I give it a little mark for sure. And I often put scare marks on fear under the study utilizing a fearological lens that critical that we don't even understand the full impact of fear as a societal force yet. We understand a lot of people talking about fear mongering and so on across the disciplines. All right, let's move on. It provides new coping tools. Well, that's yeah. I would definitely mark it down. They have not understood my work and or interpreted it for whatever reasons, why it's missing me and putting it in here. That's not just an ego thing. It's just like a scholarly thing. Like, look at the literature, man. You're really cherry picking here. And AI pulls out and says new coping tools. Well, if you look at my work foundationally for 36 years, every time I write about fear virtually, maybe not all the time, I always say this is not about just coping with fear. It's not just providing coping tools. Hardly, hardly, hardly. I always make the contrast between fundamental coping and fundamental healing. Coping is not healing. And you can take a coping perspective on life or you can take a healing perspective on life. They are very, very different world orientations or world spaces, as Ken Wilber might argue. And that's a useful term. What is that space of inhabitation of a being in existence? Are you going to be just interested in coping? Is that your goal in life? Or you're interested in healing? Some people say, well, you got to do coping first and then you can do healing. Yeah, there's problems with that argument. And mainly because healing gets the end of the shrift. It gets the marginalized position. And I go, no, healing naturally and intelligently has to be number one. Coping is just because you haven't got to healing yet, and or you may be choosing not to heal and just to cope. And sorry, friends, but that is what 99.99999% of the human species is doing for the most part. Although there are certain cultures, more indigenous cultures, one could argue, or more conscious cultures, more matured conscious cultures that use healing as priority and they recognize that is the way nature works. Nature's not that interested in coping when you're injured. When you're injured, you have to heal. It's not just cope with it. Bigger discussion. It's related to fear and fear study, but I won't go into that. So this talk is about. So here's where it gets to me that the reductionist bias and picking actually picks a name of a researcher now who actually is, a researcher sort of, but mostly a practitioner, psychologist, therapist type. And as far as I can tell, pretty much a cognitive behavior therapist. And that's Mary Poffenroth. And she's done some videos, written a little, done a couple of video series in which she called it Fearology. Never cited my work and came out only, way, I think 2020 or something and did this series. It's like I've been doing this since 1989, folks, and coined Fearology since 2000, and this person can't do basic research to acknowledge who is the founder and coiner of this serious use of the word Fearology. So she's a psychologist, cognitive psychologist, and I find them pretty much all arrogant. Sorry to say that, folks. It's true. My experience over and over, conferences, publications, editors, reviewers, they are so arrogant that they think they have all the knowledge there is because they're in the field of psychology. See, that's the hegemony of psychology. Provides new coping tools by studying fear. Researchers like Mary Poffenroth have shown how a deeper understanding of the fear matrix, by the way, that's completely stolen. Fear matrix, she did not come up with that term. That term has been around even before my publications and writing. And that is one of the major constructs I use is the fear matrix. It's just so inaccurate again and distortive. And it puts this Mary Poffenroth on a pedestal that they do not deserve. Why is AI doing that? Mary Poffenroth and her corporation or business, are they paying AI to put her a higher priority? I don't know how this system works. That's why I don't like it. But that's same on Google. It's same on these digital searches by these big corporations. They have such bias, folks. And I'm speaking from someone who's been a researcher for 50 years, more or less. They're so hugely biased in how they research. And so be really skeptical, be really reluctant, do your double checking. And I'm just pointing out the top errors of AI with my question this morning. Anyways, so the fear matrix can help people recognize and neutralize their anxieties. So recognize and neutralize their anxieties. That is not healing. There's nothing. Did you see the word healing in there? Did you see the word transformation, which I use, or transmutation, which I use? These are really distinct categories of how to work with, understand, critique, and do the fear work, as I call it. This is a typical psychological answer. Maybe a little bit of philosophy behind it because philosophy is behind psychology. They've been together like this, that fear is just an emotion. You need to manage it. And so neutralize, philosophy has said the same thing. Recognize, and I'm surprised they didn't put the word conquer, anxieties. Anyway, acknowledging, I'm reading again, acknowledging that much of what people call stress is actually a form of fear, can open up new methods for coping. That's fair enough. That's accurate. Poffenroth does that. I've watched her videos. Let's go to the next point under philosophical and psychological value. Investigates fear-based disorders. Now, this word fear-based, I have written more on that in very fine detail and theorized around it since 1989, not since 2000 with the word fearology, way before that. And I distinguish fear-based very, very carefully. But let's see what AI says. They're basically saying fearology investigates fear-based disorders. And it gives no example of that. Let's see, from a translation research perspective, I have no idea what a translation research perspective means. I've never heard of that term. I've never seen it. So to me, that's just like bad use of language AI. That's a bad combo. That's not going to help people, and it's not being used. Translational research perspective. Laboratory studies on fear conditioning and extinction. This is now behavioral psychology. Fear conditioning, extinction. As soon as you say that, you're talking behavioral psychology, which is a very narrow, narrow, narrow view of psychology. Are valuable for improving the clinical treatment of fear-based psychological disorders such as anxiety. Oh my gosh. There's so many problems in there. Now it's all about clinical. Okay, that's part of the psychological value. Virology can be useful for clinical studies. So I give it part credit for identifying that, but it's like it's so skewed there in how it's put together, including fear-based psychological disorders such as anxiety. Okay, but you could give some other examples, AI, of what fear-based disorders, and then you could cite my work on fear-based. Oh, now, wow, it's going to get really complex. Your definition of fear-based here is the natural, quote, not natural, but the normal one used by popular culture, and it's used by psychology and probably a lot of philosophy, but not the best thinkers. Those are all the mainstream. So AI is very mainstream. There's nothing revolutionary here, and it's not even detecting revolutionary type of knowledge or re-envisioned theoretical new knowledge. So it's like just like grade four thinking. And I don't even know, is it thinking? It's just collating and putting things together, what it finds. Not impressed, AI. I'm not impressed. And you shouldn't be either. That's kind of my message today. On some things, maybe it's really good. I don't know. Sociological and political value. So now it went from philosophical, psychological, which is good. That's kind of the interior of the individual's world, their philosophical world, their perspective, their psychological interior perspective. That's good. And then it went to sociological and political. And that's good because that drops it down into another domain of knowing. So I'm using kind of a Wilberian four quadrant integral critique there of the types of knowledge you want, but there's so much missing in they have not done a four quadrant epistemological analysis here of fearology. They've taken two kind of basic quadrants, but I'm glad they put sociological and political value that makes fear more right than interest to just philosophy and psychology. So let's look under those two topics. In many ways, I actually put myself much in the camp of a sociologist of fear. When I say fearology, it's closely, but again, I'm transdisciplinary, so I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't put it. But my thinking is more sociological than just philosophical and psychological. Most people's understanding perspective on fear is philosophical, hardly, and most is psychological. A few much rarer, sociological and political. So, sociological and political value, let's see what it says. Well, it's going to name somebody else, and it ain't me. And it ain't some of my colleagues that I would name instead. But I appreciate that it's named somebody important. So it reveals, virology reveals the culture of fear, got in quotes, which is proper, because sociologists like Frank Ferretti have shown how a culture of fear is propagated by leaders and media who use fear to manufacture social helplessness and provide simple solutions to complex problems. Well, virology exposes the agendas behind this manipulation. Yes, it does. So again, some good marks there on a positive side in general, but culture of fear is my specialty. I have written more about it than anybody. Frank Freddy has written a lot, and he is a sociologist, so I'm not. I'm not a recognized, certified. I'm certified as an educator. Um, but so on that point, it's all about fear mongering, fearology. Often they're used terms interchangeably. I would never do that, but there is some interrelationship that's really important between the two regarding fear mongering, the use of fear to manipulate. Let's look at the next one and I'll try to wrap this up. Analyzes power dynamics. Well, thank you. Yes, it does. So, virology, and then it says, interesting here, it did see something that's important out there republished. The study of fearism, a concept related to fearology. True, very accurate. Well, guess who coined the first use of fearism systematically? What? And after me was my colleague Desh Suba, who is the philosophy of fearism guy in the world. Publications, work, effort, commitment, him since 1999, roughly, when he 2014 when he published his first major book on it. So that fearism, study of philosophy of fearism, came out big time. I picked it up, we connected. But I'd been using it a little bit before that, back to 1990. But I took off and joined with Desh Suba on this study of fearism. Our names are not mentioned here, which is absolutely ridiculous. If you're going to name Poffenroth and you're going to name Ferretti all under Fearology, and you get to even something more specific, which terms they do not use, those two, just for example, most people don't. We use fearism. We actually coined it. We design and work with it as a way to understand how to study fear and fearlessness. And our names are mentioned. So you see, AI is picking and choosing, right? It's like, and I don't know why. Is it because Poffenroth is a recognized psychologist? Yes. Do you think it's because Freddie is recognized as a sociologist? Yes. See, they're mainstream. They're people who have stuck in the disciplinary world, and that's just not Fearology in the way it is transdisciplinary needs to be made transdisciplinary. So AI doesn't get that, and it's not interested in it, sadly enough. And you never see that AI is at the end of your report says, "Oh, and I'd really like to learn more about this topic. Anyone who's reading this, please inform me what I've missed." No. So let's finish this. The study of fearism, a concept related to fearology, suggests that fear can be used as a program or ideology. Yes, I like to understand fear as ideology, ideological, fear-based, all those kinds of ideas. That's what the fear matrix is. And ideology means it's a program. It means it's leaving out certain knowledges, right, and information and bias, and it's just using other knowledge and bias, and it's basically saying no other knowledge exists. And if it does exist, it's stupid. That's what ideology is. I mean, that's the worst and simplest definition of ideology. Um, Basically, and then it says, I like this part, to keep people ignorant, in quotes, and control. I'm pretty sure it's got that from me. I use the word ignorant and arrogance as foundational, ignorance and arrogance as foundational, and actually as fear-based structures of knowing. By analyzing history and culture through a fearist lens. Well, that's Desh Suba's term. He coined that. Nobody else has coined that term. The field can uncover how fear has shaped human thought. Yeah, okay, fine. It can. Not naming my colleague, Desh Suba. I also use the word fearist lens. I've written a whole book on what it means to be a fearist. Anyway, the last point under sociological and political value informs ethical public policy. Well, it should. Does it? The AI doesn't tell you. Is it? Or is it just meant to inform? So AI is very unclear about that. But it says fearology informs ethical public policy. Ideally, should say that. Fearology raises ethical questions. Yes, it does. About the deliberate induction of fear for social control. Yes, it does. Kind of repeating above now. Research on the ethics of inducing fear can help inform public discourse and ensure that fear is not used unethically in arenas such as public health campaigns. True, but there are tons and tons of people who are not fearologists. They don't use the word fearology, who are doing research on the ethics of inducing fear to to inform public discourse in not good ways and or good ways. There's a whole field, huge field of the use of fear in advertising, right? Fear appeal advertising, it's called. So now we're not talking about fearology at all. So it has no distinction. It's got a bit of the overlap. It's got that right, AI, but it doesn't have the huge distinction of the criticality of who's a fearologist, who isn't. Why are you putting this information here under fearology? It shouldn't be there. Those people don't call themselves fearologists in fearology. They're just people who study fear in various disciplines, mostly psychology and behavioral sciences. Okay, and then the last part, critical perspectives and challenges. The concept of fearology is not without its complexities and challenges. Well, thank you, AI, for acknowledging that. That's the whole point of the concept of fearology, and it's not just a concept. See, it's really interesting. Why are you calling it a concept of fearology? It's a study. Fearology means fearology. Ology is the study of fear. It's not a concept alone. If you want to call it a concept, maybe there's something interesting there. But that's an error. It's like, it's not a concept, it's the field of fearology. Why don't you say that, AI? It's wrong. It's reductionist to call it what you've just done. But I'm glad it acknowledges there's complexities, and those complexities are trying to challenge people who oversimplify what fear is and how to manage fear. That's a big part of the criticism of true fearology. And then it says fearology overlapping with existing fields. I'm not sure what that means. Is fearology overlapping with existing fields? I don't know. And then it says, while a distinct term, thank you, fearology synthesizes existing research from many established disciplines. Yes, it does. And what you want to put many is you want to put theoretically all other disciplines and non-disciplines. That's what you're missing here at AI. I always defined it as using disciplinary knowledge and going beyond that to popular knowledge from many sources, including, you know, popular folk tales or popular jokes that people tell can give a lot of information about fear and how to manage it. And fearologists ought to be looking at that too. This may lead to skepticism about its value as a separate field. I don't know where it's coming from on this point. I read it the first time. Where are you coming from? It's obviously being critical, AI, or it's trying to articulate people who are critical and skeptical. But it seems like AI, because it's not mentioning anybody here, particularly who's critical and skeptical of the word fearology and the study of fearology, it sounds like AI is making up its own opinion. Yeah, and it does that from the summary of the data. This may lead to skepticism about its value as a separate field, with some critics suggesting that existing researchers are already fear researchers. That last statement is illogical. I cannot understand what it's saying. Um, with some critics suggesting that existing researchers are already fear researchers, and that's a critique of fearology. Well, maybe what it's trying to say, I should back off a bit, be a little kind to AI. Maybe what it's trying to say is that why create a new term, fearology? And that's a fair criticism. That's a question that should be asked. I've asked it myself. I have videos on that. Why fearology? Is it really valuable? And because basically, yes, there are people who are fear researchers, if you want to put it that way. Fearology is not about fear researchers alone. That's a part, a very small part of fearology. Fearology is a creative study of fear like the world has never seen before. We're not talking about just fearologists or fear researchers. See what I'm getting? But I kind of get what it's trying to point to there. And I think you get it. All right, methodological challenges. So we're still under critical perspectives and challenges now to fearology. Methodological challenges, I'm really interested in this. This is because I'm a methodologist. My version of method fearology, the way it developed, is methodological. If you don't have good methods, you're going to have poor knowledge. And I'm basically arguing, don't do that with fear. Maybe you can do it with other topics, but don't do that with fear because you mess that up and don't have good methods for the study of fear, creation of fear knowledge, fear education, you're going to mess everything up. Larger argument, right? A little provocative there. You can ask me on, we can talk about this on the YouTube, or you can read again any of my work going way back to 1989 on this topic. But let's finish. Methodological challenges. It says critics note. I don't know who those critics are. I always hate it when they say, some critics suggest. That's just like bad. Like if you're going to do BAI and be this summative intelligence on the planet's knowledge, why are you not putting which critics? Then I know who you're citing. I know the context of where they come from. Then I can make some sense and make a reasonable evaluation of your complaint, your skepticism, whether it's AI skepticism or whether it's these critics. I want to know who you're talking about. Who's criticizing Fearology? I care about that. You bet I do, because I study it. And maybe they've found somebody I don't know about. Well, that'd be cool. I'd like to know more. So critics note that some fear-based research can be difficult to translate from laboratory settings to real-world human experience. Oh, this is bad logic again. This is so messed up. Um, yeah, I'm almost tempted to go to a D plus now after reading this more carefully. Trans fear-based research. Fear-based research. See, that can be interpreted two ways. That's the problem here. This is why AI is not very intelligent. It's not the brightest. Fear-based could just be researchers who their research is fear-based, right? So they're attracted to studying fear. And you could use fear-based that way in a very loose, in English, that would make sense. From a fearology perspective, like, come on, AI is summarizing fearology here. From a fearology perspective, AI ought to know fear-based is a very contentious, very critical term with a huge amount of thinking and thought and research behind it as to fear-based is not good. It's not cool. It's pathological, actually, arguably. Again, I'll leave that debate open for you, but I've published tons on fear-based and what it means and its problems and its biases and how it's used. And here is a really poor use, absolutely poor use of fear-based. Even though I get it, I'll accommodate. AI is just talking about people who research on fear a lot or something. So we'll call them fear-based research. Can be difficult to translate from laboratory settings to real-world human experience. Well, you don't have to come to fearology to critique that issue. Whether something in the laboratory, for example, of any kind of study, any kind of field, and how do you apply it to the practical field? You'd find that in any discipline, any place. So it's like, why put that in? It's like it's so not specific to understanding anything about fearology, but it is partly right because in many ways the fearology, as it's accumulated to this point or developed to this point, still in its early stages, is harder to put into application, as all theoretical philosophical methodological work is. Next sentence, in human emotion, notice focus on emotion again, which is error, even though, of course, emotions are important in fearology. In human emotion, higher order cognitive processes add complexity not easily modeled in animal studies. Well, okay, yes, I get that. You can spend time on that sentence if you want, folks. What that's got to do with fearology is minimal. This is really cognitive behavioral experimental psychology they're talking. And fearology could be involved in a dialogue with an exchange and informed by and even do that kind of research, but it'd be a fearological perspective. This is not a fearological perspective. This is just fear-based, so-called. This is just fear researchers of all kinds talking about adding complexity, because humans think at higher cognitive processes, which they do for the most part that we know, and that causes, you know, difficult to translate also from animal studies. That's what it's basically saying to human studies. Again, so uninformative and so pretty traditional basic knowledge there. Last point AI makes. Let's see what it says. Ethical considerations. Well, thank you. That's really important in fearology. The study and application of fear are laden with ethical concerns. For instance, some therapeutic techniques that involve provoking fear, such as exposure therapy, are viewed with hesitation by some practitioners due to the ethical mandate to do no harm. That could apply to any kind of researcher who researches on fear. That is not specific to or of great interest to fearologists. Thanks for listening today. Maybe this will be useful and we can have some good conversations. All the best.